welcome everyone, and thanks for coming up again. You'll be glad to know you're not having 2 hours of me waffling through a slide deck this time. It's actually going to be hopefully, well, possibly an hour of me just showing you some code and basically giving you some examples of what the actual code is capable of doing from a example of putting together. Let me just share my screen here. What you can do with Gen AI. Now, basically, I've been focusing on Gen AI for probably the last 14 months, I think. And this, what I'm going to be showing you today, is basically an engine I use for testing things. So what I do is I tend to have a framework that I use for testing capabilities and seeing what those capabilities are capable of doing before I actually start any sort of client implementations, because it's always a good idea to see if something is conceivable or possible with Gen AI, and if it's not, then just basically sort of looking down some other approaches, because there are some use cases that work very well with Gen AI, and there are some use cases that don't. One example of a use case that doesn't work well with Gen AI is things like Terraform, because although you can generate the Terraform with Gen AI, because of the nature of the way Terraform and similar IAC tools work, you have to actually have a standard definition that you run. You can't. Gen AI sort of is very good at generating things on the fly, but when you've got something that's very strictly controlled, it's not really a good use case for Gen AI. So I use this sort of what I'm going to show you, this framework I'm going to show you for sort of testing concepts and seeing if it's a useful thing for Gen AI, and if it isn't, if there's another way of doing it, or if it is, what are the type of capabilities that you're going to be looking at, and what are the sort of issues that you might run into. So I'm just going to do a little bit of presentation first, just to sort of talk back about some of the things that we looked at previously, and just sort of refresh people's sort of reminders about some of the things that you do with Gen AI and what you're actually looking at. Right, so the thing I'm primarily going to be looking at, let's just shrink that out of the way. So this is a bot which is basically plugged into a LLM, which is a large language model, but it's also been extended with different capabilities for doing things like this RAG. If you remember what that stands for, that's retrieval and, oh, come on, retrieval augmentation generated. And if you remember last time, what I was talking about was the ability to ground the queries that you do. So you sort of send things to the LLM, and it basically goes and talks to some sort of data store or some sort of application, gets some information back, and then it uses that to ground the sort of results that it's doing. So then when it returns sort of information to you, it can actually say whether that information is relevant to what you actually asked, or if it can find anything that will augment the results that it generates. So what I'm going to be showing you with a couple of demos, it's the same application, but it's looking at different sorts of use cases and different information sources. So some of them are a mixture of tooling that's being used for RAG purposes, that's in to get information back, but some of it is actually tooling to be able to actually write and actually update things in these data sources as well. So RAG is certainly one thing that we will be looking at today. The other thing I wanted to show you is this sort of idea of the tooling. If you remember, I said there are ways of registering tools, and that you can use the tools to actually give capabilities to the GenAI application. You register what those tools are capable of doing, and then you basically say, here's a query, or here's a prompt that the Gen AI model will then look at the metadata associated with that tools, and it will use the metadata to say, okay, what tools do I need to actually call? What parameters do I need to actually pass to those tools? And then it will actually invoke the tool, get the tool will then execute, and it will get the results back, and it will try and use that in a sort of format to try and augment the data that it's sort of done itself. So you might use those tools for actions, or you might use those tools for retrievals, and based on the data that it gets back, and the query that you put in or the prompt that you put in, it will basically give you a result. So I'm going to be showing you effectively tools that do both of those in this demo. So let's just go through that. Right. So that should hopefully remind you a bit of effectively what I was talking about in the previous presentation about what some tools do. So one of the ones I will be showing you is basically interacting with a database. So in this particular case, it's a MySQL database just because it's easier to store on a laptop. And basically what we'll be doing is we'll be doing some operations with that MySQL database, doing things like connecting to it. The GenAI will then actually work out the user intention. It will then look at the tools. It'll see what tools it needs to invoke. It will run those tools and it will basically get the results back. And then the model will actually process those results and then give you the actual outputs. So that's all I'm going to do with the stuff that we looked at previously. Now, the things I'm going to be demoing, based on the time that we have and the interest, because some of this may or may not be interest to, or may not be of interest to the people gathered here. Um, I'm going to be looking at databases for doing data engineering. I use data engineering in the broad term because it's a database. I'll run some queries against it, do some operations on it. But effectively, you can use it for applications development. You can use it for sort of reviewing data schemas. You could use it for inserting test data. You know, you're only really limited by the sort of query that you can think of. The second one I'll definitely look at is to do with HCM, which is hardware configuration management, CMDBs. So I've got some simple extensions that I've done to the framework I'm going to show you, which can query certain information from certain hardware. In this particular case, my laptop. And you can then use that to sort of get information back. But if you imagine, you might, if you wanted this to work on a more production scale, you could effectively link this up to many different applications and then sort of use the Gen AI to sort of talk to many different machines, as long as they've got agents or sort of got SSH open for it and you've got the login ID for the SSH user. You could use this sort of concept to talk to hundreds of machines and get the results back from hundreds of those machines and put them into a CMDB. Because it's getting the information back from all those machines, it could integrate it with other tools, because as I said, the Gen AI is effectively just an orchestrator. So what tools it invokes and the order of those tools is worked out by the Gen AI query. So if you put in a prompt that sort of said something like, go away, query all the machines that you know about, get certain pieces of information and then stick them into or create me a CMDB database in this particular database system and then insert all the information into there. You could certainly do that, because as long as the Gen AI orchestrator knows how to go and talk to those machines via a tool, and it knows how to go and talk to the database, then it should have no problem collecting all that information together, creating the database, and then updating that database with the information that it has. All you need to do is just basically do it in one prompt or a number of prompts. The Gen AI model itself doesn't really give a two hoots about what it's going to do. It can talk to multiple applications. It can talk to one application. It really depends on what tools are available for it. And optionally, if we've got some time, I'll show you also some quick integrations with code repos. One of the main use cases that I have to come across with people wanting is some integrations with GitHub or Bitbucket or ADO. So I'll show you some capabilities of that, and then if there's the interest there, might also just show you quickly integrating with Kubernetes. That was a particular one that we did for one particular customer who was very focused on microservices and then wanted the ability to sort of easily deploy microservices and debug what those microservices were doing. So Gen AI is a very good use case for being able to generate those deployments and also debug deployments that are not working. So I can show you that as well. Right. So as I said, what you basically tend to have is you have a set of tooling capabilities. So in the code that I'll show you, I've got some capabilities that are actually coded up. Um, one is connect to DB, one is actually get some information from the DB, one is actually the ability to run ad hoc SQL, and also to run some basic uh, random selects and some get some information from the schema objects based on the types of different schema objects that you ask for. So the sort of use cases that we're going to be looking at are some schema manipulation. So we'll sort of look at the actual data definitions of the tables, list some tables, and we'll do some data manipulation where we're sort of doing some things where we sort of after some PII information, or we're looking at data inconsistencies. And we might also throw in some other use cases like creating some application schemas or inserting some test data. So that's the first use case we're going to look at. So first question, can everyone see my screen okay?
Yes,
Yes,
we
indeed.
can.
Good. Okay, right. So the code for this is open source. It's in GitHub. It's in this repo here, which is try and shrink this one down a bit so you can actually see where it is. It's under my personal account and it's in called Lang Examples. Lang Examples is basically a repo I use for well, lots of different purposes, but it's got some GenAI examples in it. The ones I'm going to be playing with are in this Node.js directory. So in here, there's three samples. One is a Gemini flavor of this chatbot. One is an Olama flavor of this chatbot, and one is the OpenAI version of this chatbot. Personally, I always use the OpenAI one because I find it's better and it works more consistently. Um, the Olama one is painful because you've got to find a model that's appropriate, and it takes up a lot of disk space and requires lots of hardware. So I don't use that one. The Gemini one's okay, but I tend to find the OpenAI one actually works a lot better. It's Node.js and it's got a Docker file that runs it. So if you're familiar with Docker, it's basically just a small virtualized environment. You can just pull it, build it, and there's instructions on in this README about how to run it. But I won't go through that. So you'll have to forgive the UI. I didn't really, because it's more of a test framework, this one, I haven't really put in a lot of effort into getting the UI to look nice and pretty. It's just basically a simple chatbot UI that I put together. And it basically runs as a REST service. So effectively, you can run it either talking it via some sort of UI, or you can just run it via curl, or you can run it, as an open as a sort of URL that your any other application talks to. If you're familiar with REST API, then or using endpoint URLs, then you're familiar with using REST API. But basically, it's just a simple REST API interface that you can interact with. I'm just going to use this actual little chatbot thing I put together to actually interface with it. The only reason why I'm just saying it's not brilliant is because the output isn't that pretty compared to if I was doing this for a proper one. So what I'm going to be doing is I've got a local database which is running, which is MySQL database, and I'm just going to run some sort of queries against that database that will actually use some of the capabilities of this chatbot. And I'll sort of show you what the code looks like. You've got a chatbot application, which is basically effectively an interface on top of OpenAI in this case, which basically just sort of has an interaction capability and then uses the OpenAI interface to interact with it. I'm not going to go through the code for that because you'd probably be here all evening. And then there's basically lots of different files that sort of have lots of different capabilities that are then sort of exported and shared with the actual chatbot itself. So what the chatbot does is it basically has a way of registering different types of functions So you'll see that there is a something called a register function. And what that register function does is it will take a session, sorry, it will take a particular interface. It will register the function that that interface uses. It will basically put in a sort of string about telling the so this is this metadata that I talked about, telling the chatbot what this function is actually used for. So when the actual chatbot comes to analyze the intent of something, it'll say, okay, look through my function array, try and do some sort of matching against. This is what the Gen AI actual application does. It will try and uh, match against these descriptions to sort of say, okay, I want to do an SSH scan or something. Um, what should I use to do that? And it will basically look through these functions. It will try and find something that's appropriate, and then it'll invoke it. And then you have these sorts of targets, which basically say what sort of the if it's analyzed the intent and it's analyzed the function it's going to use, it needs to match the function, the sort of the prompt that you give it to the actual parameters that have been exposed in these functions. So this is additional metadata to say, try and map some of the prompts that, or in the information in the prompts, not just to the function name, but actually to the parameters in that function. So effectively, this is a little function that sits on top of the standard for registering metadata, so that when the model comes along that says, I need to analyze the intent, I've got the intent, now I need to do something with it, it will basically look through this metadata and say, ah, yes, okay, I found a function that needs to do something, so now I need to invoke that function. So we've got a bunch of functions here, depending upon what particular thing. Let me try and find the right one for the databases. Load database. There we are. That's database functions. So what you do is you can see there's it's loading up some database capabilities here. I'm giving it a function to use to connect to the database. I'm giving it a function to dump some database structures. I'm giving it a function to select some database information. I'm giving it a function to list schemas. I'm giving it a function to list schema objects, and I'm giving it a function to run ad hoc SQL. So basically, whenever it does a database operation, it will use any of these functions to actually try and match what it's going to do against that query, against that database, using the prompt that I give it. So I don't think let's look at the code anymore. I don't think. So I've got some sample prompts here that I'm just going to basically have a go with. So what you can see here is that the application has looked through all of the prompts that are there. It's found the Connect database. It's sort of said, okay, given the sort of prompt that I gave it, which was connect to this database, da da da, it's mapped the function that it needs to use, which is connect to database, and it's also mapped the parameter based on what I gave it. So it sort of said, okay, I found the function that I need to use. I'm going to connect to the database. I've invoked the tool. I've gone away. I've done the operation, and I've come back. I've put together the results from that call into the actual API that the function uses. And then basically what it says is, okay, I've connected to the database. Now, what do you want to do next? So as I don't really know what this database is. Well, I do, but I don't. I'm going to pretend I don't. So I am new with this database, and I need to perform some analysis on it. Can you please give me a summary of what this database is about. I.E, what is it used for? So I'm giving it a perfectly, it's just natural English. Um, I'm not sort of structuring the English in any way. It's just natural flowing English. And I've just basically said, okay, tell me what it's about. So if we go back to the function list again, it's basically gone through the available functions, and it's decided, okay, well, let's try this function. So it's got the dump database structure function. So the dump database structure function basically just lists all the tables. So as you can see, it's returned all the tables. It's returned some of the contents and the information about those tables. Great. And then what it's done is it said, okay, that's basically a RAG operation. So it said, okay, I've got all these tables. Now let's just do a quick analysis about what these tables are and what they do, or what they could potentially do. And then it's gone and told me, okay, well, this is what's in there. I didn't actually ask it to tell me what's in there, but it's got the structure back from the database, and it's basically said, okay, well, this database appears to be related to a bookstore or library system with the following main features and tables. So it's basically trying to look at the database structure and then use that for this RAG mechanism I was talking about to try and identify what tables are in there, and also what what those tables might relate to. So it can give me some information about what this database actually is. Okay, good. All right, fine. So what do I want to do? Right. Given these tables and the data in them, can you summarize for me what this database is about? Okay, so it's just told me it's an online bookstore. All right, fine. So it manages information about the books, and it manages information about customers. It's got some borrowing records, and it's got some wish list capabilities. So the database serves to handle the catalog of books, customer transactions, interactions, comprehensive system for, okay, so basically it's an online bookstore. Fine. All right. Okay. So given that, what data is in this database, and is it live or test data? So now I'm actually starting to go into getting it to actually look at the contents of the data and actually see if there's anything in there to tell me whether it's a live or test database. Um, which of course it hasn't really given me back any useful response. Along with use stamps, okay, that's fine, but that doesn't really tell me what I want. So, okay, it suggests the data is likely test data or a mix of test data and sample data. Okay, so this is most likely just a test database. Yes, okay, so that's fine. I can use this for testing then. All right, so um, given the test data in here, can you analyze it to tell me if there is any PII information, anything related to confidential data that might stop me from using it for testing purposes. So what I've asked it to do is just basically look at the contents of the data, and actually just start to do some data engineering on it. Well, a bit of data engineering on it, nothing too exciting. So what it's done is it's looked at the contents of the structure. It might have looked at some of the data as well, and it says, yes, okay, there is some test data in here, but there is information that might be considered PII. All right, so it probably might be a good idea not to actually dump this data. Or if I did dump it, then dump it as a sort of masked format. Okay, right. Uh, I will use this data as part of a performance test run. Can you tell me how much data is currently in the tables and recommend how much data I should add to allow me to do a reasonable set of performance testing? So that's a bit more of a complicated one. I've basically asked it to look at the amount of data that's actually in the tables currently, and sort of give me a recommendation for actually telling me how much data I actually want really to do performance testing. So it's told me that there's approximately, or at least in a sample of the tables, there's approximately 50 to maybe 70 rows or records. And for doing a performance test, I should really have at least maybe 50,000 records, um, or even more. So let me say, okay, if I wanted you as the application to insert this test data, can you estimate how long it would take you to add 50,000 records? Okay, so in theory, it could. And in theory, it says it could take a few 30 seconds up to 50 minutes, but then it might take it 15 minutes. So let me just say, all right, okay, I don't have that long. So can you add maybe 100 records to each of the tables that is appropriate for that table? And I will start my testing with that. So what I'm asking it to do now, yes, I want you to do it. Yes, please add the data. You do not need to ask me in the future. Just do it. So I'm now asking it to start adding that, well, hopefully asking it to now start adding test data to each of the main records. Now, there wasn't a function there that was actually adding test data. So what it's doing now is it's actually generating the ad hoc. It's using that ad hoc function to actually add the test data, or hopefully using the ad hoc function to add the test data. It depends on how much the prompt is. I do not want an SQL script. I want you to add the data. Do it. So if you remember last week, I was talking about hallucinations and where the prompts sort of specifically tie down what the actual application is doing. That was one sample where I asked it to add the data, but it sort of said, well, okay, I can add the data, but I'll do it as a script. But that's not what I asked it to do. So I had to go in and actually clarify with the prompt to tell it that I wanted it to actually add the data for me. So as you can see, it's now using the ad hoc function SQL to actually run insert statements. Okay, so it's now added 5 records, but I didn't want it to add 5 records. I I wanted you to add 100 records, not just 5. Do the 100. The LLM will actually understand that if you use sort of capitals and exclamation marks, that you're emphasizing things. So if you sometimes feel like you have to tell it or tell the LLM to actually do something and just do it, then what I tend to find is that if I use capitals or exclamation marks, it will understand it slightly better. Don't ask me why, but that's the way it's designed because it does understand sentiment and it does understand the use of sort of uh, emphasis, shall we say. Um, I often find myself sometimes swearing at the damn thing as well, just to say, go ahead and do it. I don't care, just do it. So now you can see it's actually adding, hopefully, the 100 records I asked it to add in the first place. You might see also cases where it actually does come back with errors. A lot of the time, what it will do is it will try because I've set up. You might remember last week, sorry, last month I was talking about different types of creativity parameters. Whether you could use parameters to make it more or less creative or make it more what's the right word? Not almost robotic in what it does. Um, if you tune it to be more creative, if it finds an error or it tries to do something and it hits an error, it will try and look for different ways of doing it. So you might actually see errors coming up, but it will mask those errors because it's going to do it in a different way to actually work around those errors. So what it will do is it will basically try the function. It may generate an error. It will get the error message back. And then what it'll do is it will say, okay, it doesn't work that way. So let's try it another way. And then often it will try it another way, um, but maybe not in all cases. Okay, so what's seems SQL statements for the full set of under had a syntax error due to incomplete variables, break the inversion, smudge stats, redo them 100 small backs. Let's do that later. Uh, can you analyze the schema and the data for any issues or inconsistencies that I might have to fix? I am particularly interested in uh, data which might be invalid or cause the application issues. So I've now just sort of started on the, what you might do with it as a typical, well, not a data engineer, but what you might do and come in and sort of look at um, issues that might cause your application to start to have problems, or things that might have inaccurate records, or things that might cause logical problems. So I'm actually getting the LLM to actually run queries against the data, and then use that in that RAG way to process the information and sort of get any results back that don't make sense. And then try and report to me anything that it thinks might be issues that I need to fix. Okay, so there are some couple of issues there. Right, can you please fix them? Right. Okay, so it's now fixed those issues that it identified, um, or at least it's fixed them in one way. Uh, so hopefully you've got a set of consistent data. Is all the data in this database now valid, consistent, and ready for testing? Okay, good. Right. Now, you can also use this sort of approach for being able to identify sort of enhancements as well. So let's say you've got a particular database performance issue that you're looking at. So what we want to say is, please analyze schema and assume that there are hundreds, there are hundreds of thousands of records in the primary tables. Are there any potential performance issues that might be encountered due to the current schema design? I.E, are there any indexes, constraints, or other changes I could make to the schema to make the application potentially run quicker? Okay, what are you telling me? So it's analyzed the schema under the assumption that there's lots of hundreds of thousands of records, and here are some potential performance improvements. Are typically present constraints. So those are just some general recommendations, which I'm not really interested in. What I want you to do is, okay, that does not really tell me much. Look at the schema definition and tell me what improvements or performance I could make. Okay, are there any actual right? Okay, so it's actually identified some performance improvements that I could make by adding things to the schema. Okay, all right. The main action of improvements is adding schemas. It's adding indexes. Okay, fine. So, uh, all right, thanks. Um, make those schema changes for me by adding those indexes to the foreign keys. So hopefully what it should do is it should add some indexes using that ad hoc SQL function. Yeah. So it's added some indexes. Let's just see what it's done as an example. Okay, yeah, so there you go. It's gone and understood that it needs to add indexes. It's gone and understood what the context of those indexes are, and it's gone and added the indexes. So, I could plug away at this for asking different types of queries till the cows come home, but you get the general idea. So effectively, I can use this sort of chatbot and the tooling that it's sort of connected to basically go away and ask information about the data that's in there, the schema that's there, the consistency, to add test data, to update it, effectively any database operation, and it will generate the SQL for me, and it will implement that SQL, and it will also sort of use it in a RAG mode to sort of look at the information, identify if there's any problems with it, and maybe even fix them. I could even do something like, given the, okay, what books have sold well uh, from this store? I.E, which ones are generating me the most money? Okay. Could you recommend any additional popular titles I should add to my store? Okay. All right. If those books are not currently listed in my catalog, then please add them. Right, okay, I think that's enough probably enough to give you the sort of general idea about what you can do with it, for books at least. Any particular queries or questions or anything you'd like me to look at with that prior to moving on to the next one?
Debayo had a question about SQL training, was it? I don't know if you can unmute yourself and explain more about your question. Otherwise, we can just
Well,
move
okay,
on.
well, I can basically, I'm not doing this is a standard sort of generic model. It hasn't been trained with any SQL specific information. All it's doing is it knows how to interact with the data. It's got a tool to interact with the database. So it's got a tool that to basically say, it can get information from the database and it can run SQL against that database. The actual SQL that it's generating is actually coming from the LLM itself. So the LLM knows, based on the prompt that I've given it, what SQL it needs to generate, and it will generate that SQL and then just run that SQL. So all of the SQL that you see generated here
Yeah.
is actually being done by the standard model. And in this case, I think it's oh, which model am I using? Give me a sec. It's that one. Yeah, it's just using an open one of the mini GPT models, OpenAI GPT models.
Okay.
So
Excellent.
it's one of the standard models that it comes with OpenAI.
Okay, that's fine then. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Right. Any other particular questions on that, or we can move on to the next one? As I said, I mean, you could throw literally any prompt at it you like. It's based on that database. I created that schema using the this application. So I basically told the this chatbot I wanted to create a database that was for book management or managing an online bookstore, and it created all the schema. And then I've added functionality to it by just simply saying, can you add a wish list system? Can you add a customer management system? And it basically creates a schema. I haven't needed to do any SQL directly myself. It's just done it all for me.
By database administration.
Yep, yep. And that's one of the use cases that the customer, or one particular customer was looking at, uh, was basically, they had lots of databases. They didn't know what the heck those databases were because they were quite old. They needed to manage those databases. They needed to identify conflicting data within those databases, and this was one of those applications we put together to help them do that. Except this one's running on MySQL. The one that they were using was Oracle,
Okay,
but it's the same.
fantastic.
It's the same logic.
Yeah. So what's next?
Right. The next one is looking at HCM. So I'm just going to reset this conversation. Reset just to remove all the history, because when you do a chatbot, sorry, when you do operations with a an LLM, what you essentially do is you build up a context. The more queries you add it, the more context it stores. Um, that sometimes, if you're going to switch into something completely different, that previous context might interfere with the one that you're running at the moment. So I'm just going to I just reset the context so it doesn't know anything about what I was previously talking about. I'm now going to talk about something completely different.
Like going into
Right.
new chat when you're changing topics on a
Yeah,
regular
effectively.
chatbot. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, in the context of this one, do that and do that. Right. In the context of this one, what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be trying to look at some HCM information. So I'm basically going to be talking about, you know, this is effectively a more smart version of something like Splunk, or that sort of utilities. This is purely RAG. So this is actually getting information out of systems. It's using some tooling to connect to those systems, get information out of it, and then be able to analyze the information I get out of it. Um, Obviously, because it's hardware and it's a list of services, I haven't actually set it up to be able to do any operations with it other than get the information. Um, but if I was going to do, excuse me, if I was going to look at something, maybe I wanted to write a system to do things like patching, or stop services or start services, or do more, shall we say, destructive operations, like maybe update OSs and stuff like that. I could do that in here, but I would need to add the capabilities of doing that. But given that the fact that this is a sort of system I want to limit what its capabilities are, I've limited the amount of functions I've actually got to just functions that read information. So it's not going to do anything, hopefully, destructive. Right, get rid of that one. So the code for this is I think it's get info. And basically it just runs simple shell scripts, or simple shell commands. It basically supports running an SSH command. So it's very much like Ansible. If you're ever familiar with Ansible for IAC, Ansible basically just allows you to run SSH commands on a target. This is a much more limited version of that sort of capability. So this has the ability to sort of run particular commands against particular types of OS, and then based on that, it'll get the information back, and then allow you to actually process that information. So what I'm going to do is just basically scan the local network and tell me which machines are capable of being accessed via SSH. And I'm going to give it a starting point for a network range. Otherwise, it might default to 10. So what this has basically said is that there are four machines on my network, that have different IP addresses on my internal network that are capable of responding to SSH. Okay, that's good. Connect to those machines and tell me what OS they are. Now, this one is not, this is actually set up in a way that will only allow it to connect to one machine, because I've got effectively what's called a Docker secret, that actually hosts the user ID and password. So I've only actually set it up to allow it to talk to one machine. Um, but as you can see, it's connected to that machine, and it's actually found out the OS version. Okay, that's good. So all right, connect to, and tell me what services are currently running on that machine, and what those services actually do. So again, that's running an SSH command, and it's under the hood. It's basically using that tool to go away, run an SSH command within the Docker container to connect to that remote machine and actually get some information back from that remote machine, and then use that to actually tell me what services are running, and then sort of actually explain what those services actually are. So in this particular case, it's obviously a Mac machine and it's running a bunch of Unix services, and it's just telling me basically these are the services that are running and these are what they do. Okay, fine, good. What processors are currently, oh, actually, I say, okay, what is the hardware on that machine? I'm particularly interested in the disk space, memory, and chipsets. Okay, well, get disk space. Get the disk space info. Okay, so it's given me some information about the disk space. It's told me there's a couple of partitions on there. It's told me how much disk space is currently used on some of those partitions, and it's told me how much physical memory I've got. Great. Okay, so please give me a summary. Please give me a summary report for this machine, including the hardware services and hardware services, OS, and processors, as I will want to add it to my CMDB.
With some of the previous things you showed us on the database, you took us behind the curtain and we saw some of the commands it was running. I'm just wondering if there's an appropriate point when it might be worth looking at how this is getting some of that information.
Yeah. Again, this is so these are the tools that it's running. Most of these are just OS commands. So you can see it's running it's attempting to run some OS commands here. So it basically says, okay, I'm going to try and get this information out for you. I will try and run some of these OS commands.
And are those commands ones that you defined in the get info source, or are they commands that it's just pulled from the internet somewhere?
These are commands I've told it to run because
Okay,
in this case, I'm being a lot more paranoid about what I want it to do. I don't want it just randomly running commands on my machine, because it's a privileged account. Therefore, I want to be very strict and control what it's actually doing.
yeah,
So I've actually told it what commands it's capable of running, and it's not allowed to run anything other than those commands. I don't have the equivalent, so I haven't given it the ability to do an ad hoc effectively. Yeah, in the database example, I gave it the ability to run any ad hoc database. In this example, I've only given it the ability to run specific commands. So I've actually coded the tool to actually only run certain commands in getting particular types of information back.
okay, probably quite sensible.
Yes, because obviously the ability to run any command on any machine on the network might be rather a sort of big security
Yes,
security hole.
yes.
Um, So as you can see, it's done a report for me. It's not a very pretty report, but it's good enough. So I could now say connect to the database. I haven't tried this previously, so I'm not certain how this will work, but let's try it anyway. And create me a CMDB type table that will store this HCM information, this CMDB information. Make this table support not just the information you have retrieved about this machine, but also store information of the same type from from other machines. I will scan as well. So what I've done now, hopefully, is ask it to take the information it's got from the HCM callouts on the machine, connect to the database I was talking to previously, and create a database table and put the information into that table, which theoretically it's done. We explored, okay, design, right. Can you insert the data? If you want, I can help you insert. Yeah, can you insert the information? Can you insert the information about the machine we just explored into that new table? Okay, cool. So it's taking the information that I had in the, yep, okay. It's not a complete schema, but anyway, it's good enough. So it's got the information that I had based on the information from that machine. It's created the table and it's inserted the information into that machine. So what I could do is then sort of run a prompt that basically said, scan every machine that you know about, get the information, stick it into the same table. So I could do one or two prompts to get me a CMDB from nowhere. And then I could, in future, if it changed, I could sort of tell the prompt to go away, rescan those machines and update the information in that table.
Fantastic.
Because all it's doing is just, it knows about these tools, and it just calls these tools based on the intent that I give it. So if it's talking to HCM tools or it's talking to database tools, it doesn't really care. It just knows that it needs to go and talk to this tool to get this information, talk to this tool to stick the information to that database. So it's quite happy to talk to whatever tool it needs to. Right. Okay. So that's talking about CMDB. Any questions about that bit?
I haven't seen any questions pop up in the chat.
No. Okay. So which ones have we done? We've done databases, we've done HCM. I think this is shall we, which would people be more interested in, talking about code or talking about deployments?
That's to do with GitHub repos.
GitHub repos, or talking about Kubernetes or deploying things to Kubernetes.
Are there many people who work in deployment, DevOps, who'd like to know how to manipulate their machines? I'd be interested in the second, but I don't know. Maybe more people are familiar with GitHub.
Okay, we can talk about the GitHub one. Okay, the GitHub one. Well, I'm not going to show all of this capabilities because there's quite a lot there. But basically, the GitHub one, as default, has the ability to manipulate actions and also has the ability to manipulate functions. The functions are basically things like querying information from it, pulling the code, committing files to the code, creating branches, creating pull requests, and uh, committing code back to the repo. I'm not going to do all that because it's sort of getting a bit late now. So I think we've covered the general idea, but I can show you sort of the examples of how this is generally the more popular one that people sort of like to use. Now I've got a code repo, I've got a user, but this supports users and organizations. So let me just sort of reset my conversation. Context reset. So, okay, what public repos does the GitHub user T-Pain currently have? So this is using the GitHub API. Oops. So what GitHub does, what the LLM will do is it will basically look at finding the particular. I wonder actually if it's already encached in this stuff. They've got the function.
I think you've passed it about halfway down. I saw
Oh,
some
have I
stuff
already
about
passed
GitHub.
it?
Just under Kubernetes. Oh, a bit further up.
Let's check completion. Right, okay, let's list public repos. Right, okay. So that's the functions it's found. It's passed in the username, which is me. And then it's basically said, okay, these are the, yeah, okay, it's not actually listing the, I thought it listed the actual call, but it doesn't. Okay, so it's listed the actual, it's found the function, it's found the parameters, it's put in the function call, and it's returned the list of repos that I currently have in the public ones that I currently have anyway. Okay, that's good. Right, so can you tell me what these repos are about, i.e., what do they do? Now, I'm not certain if that will actually go away and do anything as far as calling the code, because I think it's already got enough there. Oh no, it does. Yeah, okay, it's calling the readmes. It's finding the readmes. And it's doing a quick scan of the repo. So see how far it gets. Okay, so what it's done is for each of those repos, it's basically tried to see if there's a README, and if there is a README, it's pulled it and it's just done a quick load of the README and just done a quick summary of the README to tell me what these repos are about. So it's giving me a quick one-liner about what each of these repos is doing, which is fine. Not all of them have a README, so I'm guessing for some cases it'll just use the name to actually work out what it's doing as well. Okay, good. So let's choose a repo with some code in it, which doesn't have too much, hundreds of examples of code. Okay. In the repo, can you do a more detailed analysis and tell me what the code in this repo is doing? I am interested in what languages it is, if what the routines do, and what the structure of the repo is. So what it's doing now is it's invoking a list. It's trying to get the structure of the repo first, I guess. Then it's getting some information about the code in there based on the structure. And then it's analyzing some of the code in there. And then it will tell me what this repo is about, hopefully. Yeah, this is where I said it. The GUI isn't exactly too pretty. It's sort of a bit, you know, if I was gonna do this for real, I'd basically change this one to actually help make this output a bit more pretty, or put in a permanent role, which would basically tell it to make the output pretty. But basically, what it's identified is it's identified that it's a Google Cloud Run repo, and it's got a couple of samples in there. One is a demo app which is written using Spring Boot. There's some a couple of other applications. Some of which are RESTful services. So it's done a quick review of that repo, told me, you know, basically what that repo is about. Okay, give me the structure of that repo in a tree format. Okay, so it's reported on the structure of that repo. So you can see it's got a couple of sample applications in there. It's interesting that it didn't go all the way down, even though I told it to sort of list the structure, but it's only done some of it. I would probably have to tell it to go recursively down everything and tell me the structures, but I don't want to do that. Okay, right. So review the code in this repo in the directory samples. Can't even remember what these are now. Structures, that one, try that one. And give me a detailed security review to identify any potential code issues that I might need to fix. I am particularly interested in anything that might cause a security audit to fail. So what it's doing now is it's running some functions to get the code. It will return the code to the LLM, and then the LLM will actually do, hopefully, a security review on that code, or detailed security review on that code, and just identify if there's any particular issues I need to worry about. Docker file, creates a dedicated group. Yeah, okay, that's good practice. That's fine. The app is Spring Boot. Yeah, okay. Is there anything there I need to worry about though? Bucket, yeah, okay, that's fine. So that's all good so far. Does not, controllers do not show any explicit without authentication. Anyway, okay, so there's an issue there I need to worry about. Applications do not appear to show any service reviews, logs, which is good. General, no secrets or credentials are hard coded. Okay, fine. I might need to add some rate limiting. Okay. Give me a recommended list of things I need to fix in this code to enhance the security posture. So it's now done a code review of all the code in that repo, or at least in that subdirectory I asked it to, identified some security problems and told me basically what I need to fix to get those security problems sorted out. Now, I could actually tell the code to go away and fix those issues as well. So I could actually get it to create a branch on that repo, fix the security issues, and put the commit those fixes to the branch, and then create a PR for it. But I'm not going to do that because I don't particularly want to do any write operations to that repo. So I could also, while I'm here, create a new repo in T-Pain called, I don't know, REST API demo, and create a simple REST API demo service in that repo that I can use to show how REST API works. Make the code Node.js and Node.js, and add a simple Docker file to do the build of the service, and also add a GitHub workflow to run the Docker file when code is committed on their main branch. Now, this is a bit more complicated and it may or may not work. But basically what I've asked it to do is a couple of write operations. So I've asked it to create a new repo called test API demo. I've asked it to create a simple REST service in that repo using Node.js, add a Docker file to do the build, and then add a GitHub workflow to run that Docker file when code gets committed to the mainline. Let's see how it deals with that.
I guess if it doesn't manage, then you could simply break that down into
Yeah,
several
yeah, you could do
steps.
it. You
And
could do it one after another, and then sort of
it's been really mind-boggling, though, to see the extent to which this expands on just, a lot of us have got used to how you can prompt to get information from the internet or ask questions about certain topics, but the ability to delve into your data, into your code, into your hardware estate, and interactively discover and ask queries and gather information and fix issues. It's absolutely incredible the amount that this is opening up to the capabilities that you can do.
yeah. I mean, that's why I sort of started to look at Gen AI because I thought it was what people were doing with it. Some of it is overhyped by all means. I mean, it's not all perfect, um, but there's certain use cases that are very good for it. And there's certain use cases that make a lot of sense. So one of the clients I was working with earlier this year was looking at using Gen AI as part of the help desk system. So what they wanted was basically the ability to write email analysis and extensions into things like Outlook to actually create draft emails based on the email that gets. So if you get an email coming from a client or a consumer, that email may be a problem, or it may be can you update my account with X, Y, and Z? Um, and was how could you analyze that email, work out what the intent was, and then create a Gen AI um, application that would actually go and do the operations that someone had asked for. So if someone said, can you tell me all the bills that I have on my system? Or sorry, can you tell me all the bills I have for my current account? Or can you update the meter reading for this particular account? Or can you update the billing details for this particular account? It was how could we use Gen AI to interact with to basically do the analysis of the sentiment, to do the analysis of the action, and then actually perform that action in a way that for some operations was just seamless, and in some operations where it was actually going to do a write operation, like update an account or something, have a method of being able to raise a ticket to actually ask that operation to be done, and then just get someone to sign off on it. So you can do lots of use cases with Gen AI, but you have to be aware of one, if those use cases are appropriate, and two, uh, whether those use cases are something you want to allow the Gen AI to sort of do automatically, or you want to do what's called a human in the loop. So you get someone to review it before it does it. Um, there are some operations that are I'd be happy doing things, letting the AI operation, run quite happily automatically, like asking for um, yeah, policy updates or being able to, get some policy information because that's just a simple query. I would not be happy with asking Gen AI to sort of go away and do patching or update a user's account without having some way of actually just verifying that the it wasn't going to go off and do something stupid.
Mhm.
Because remember, I was talking about this issue of hallucinations. Gen AI still has quite a lot of situations where it gets things completely wrong. So it may like 80% of the time be quite happy, but maybe 20% of the time it gets the wrong end of the stick and goes off and starts doing something completely different that you don't want it to do. But so yeah, I mean it's very good for certain use cases, but you have to understand what those use cases are, and you also have to understand um, how those use cases interact with the systems that you want to do it with. Because as I said, Terraform would be a very good use case, but unfortunately, Terraform, because of the way it works, it has to have a almost, you're creating something from a static definition. You're not just uh, ad hoc, creating something ad hoc and then running it ad hoc. So Terraform's not a very good example for using Gen AI with,
No,
although it
but
would be a
but
good example
definitely,
if it worked.
but definitely the email analysis, because it's language based. It's about summarizing and interpreting things that people have written and trying to work out what needs to be done. And also the way that you've approached this, you've iteratively started off by finding out some information, then gone deeper into particular subjects. I'd imagine that when it comes to automating business processes, you would do it in a similar way.
Yeah.
Of the emails in my inbox, how many of them are to do with this kind of thing? And if there's 100, then maybe you look at ways that you can automate those, especially if they're very simple operations.
Now, this is a perfect example where it actually, I would say it's hallucinated. Um, it might be a problem with the code, or it might sorry with the implement. No, I don't think it's a problem with the implementation. Uh, it says it has created things. So it says it's created the service. It says it's done something, but it hasn't actually done it. That's right. So you can see here it's part of the initial commit. It's only created one file. Okay. So what happened to all the other files it's claimed it's created?
Friday
It's set that,
afternoon job, that one.
yeah. So that's the point where you sort of start looking at trying to work out whether it's the Gen AI problem
Yeah,
or whether it's an actual application API problem. Um,
excellent. Yeah.
that's
Right. Well, you've shown us an awful lot of things. I just want to make sure before we let you go, whether there's anybody. We've had some good feedback in the comments about what people have learned from this. I'm just wondering if there's anybody else who's got any last minute questions or something else they want to understand. If you want to maybe come off mute, if you want to shout out a question.
Hi, team, and out. Sorry, what's the name? Gallagher?
Arthur, yes.
Arthur. Yeah, sorry, this is my first time joining you guys, and I must say this is interesting. Is this like ongoing training, or it's just one-off? Because I've done this, I've done database management before, but talking about 20 years ago when Oracle 11G and 11i was the thing then. And yeah, it feels like a refresher course for me, but I want to know, is this an ongoing course or
No,
it's
No, this was just a one-off from
uh,
me.
all right.
So this
So
was just to try and give people an idea of
Yeah.
what the capability. We've seen what AI can do in simple terms, but
Mm.
if you were going to add a little bit more intelligence to it, if you were going to give it some instructions, how could you take it that much further in what it's capable of doing?
Yeah, I mean, when I did my training, it was just the SQL, the prompt and things like that. I'm talking about years. I think it was about 2000 and 2006 or 7. I'm not really sure now, but yeah, that was then. But yeah, it's good to know you can use AI for it now.
Mm.
Thank
yeah, I
you
mean,
for the
as I
time.
said, there's so many things you could potentially use it for, but you have to understand what it is. You have to actually understand the use cases and make sure it is relevant for AI
Yeah,
and how and if you can actually interface with it, because if there's no interface or programmatic interface that allows you to connect to the tool you're trying to connect to, then it's you can't do it anyway. Fortunately, most tools these days have a way of being able to programmatically interface with it, but that's not the case for everything.